I think that we need to stop thinking of philanthropic funders purely as fuel for our missions and more like customers that we deeply need to understand and serve in their own right.
Interesting.
I get the feeling you got some things to say about this.
I have opinions. As fundraisers, as leaders at organizations doing this work, really understanding motivations and trying to attract right fit partners for our work. But the longer I've been doing this work and also just kind of seeing some of the just frankly shitty downstream effects from some of these funders who, let's remember, have tax benefits to being set up this way, have hoarded massive amounts of wealth. So they're in this position of privilege and power. And so we should hold them to a very high standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ready to get into it?
Let's go. I'm Eric Ressler.
I'm Jonathan Hicken.
And this is Designing Tomorrow.
All right, Eric, there was this post on LinkedIn the other day that nearly had me throw my mouse against the wall. It was about, there was from a fundraiser, I'm not naming names, that was talking about how this foundation wasn't structuring a grant in a multi-year way, and it was a kind of a call for foundations to structure their giving in a way that met that particular organization's needs. And it came off to me as totally out of touch and very entitled, with an assumption that the work is so important that the funders should acquiesce to our needs. And the first thought that came to mind was, no, dude, it's completely the other way around. And so I want to unpack this idea that funders actually don't owe us anything as nonprofits and what that actually means. So at the end of the day, I feel like when we're working with, I'm gonna sort of hone in on private foundations for the sake of this conversation. Although I think the same applies for government agencies and any number of funding, philanthropic funders.
Okay.
I think that we need to stop thinking of them as purely as fuel for our missions.
Okay.
And more like customers that we deeply need to understand and serve in their own right.
Interesting.
And what I mean by that is the individuals, I mean, we can bring this down to even a human level. The individuals that are working at these foundations, they have goals. They have objectives. They have strategy that they're trying to execute. And when we put them in the position that somehow they are not doing right by us, I think that just causes like separation in the industry that I don't think is healthy for anybody.
Yeah. Okay. I think this one's super thorny. That's my first like take on this one.
Okay.
Thorny, complex, nuanced, use your word. Because I can make counter arguments for every argument you just made.
Okay.
So there's a long-held power dynamic in the space of social impact where funders basically hold all the power because they've got the money, right? There's exceptions to this, but let's just go with like, that's the general power dynamic. And for example, like Jen Wynn, who we had on the show from the Stupsky Foundation, who is clearly an institutional funder. They're unique because they're a spend down philanthropy. This is not the Stupsky's point of view, but it's Jen's point of view that philanthropy in and of itself should just be abolished because the structure is so broken. It's not my take necessarily. Like I respect Jen's take, and I think that there's a lot of, she has, really good reasoning behind her take on that. She just wrote an article about it, which we'll link to in the show notes. I think where this comes from and where we can kind of loop into, the movement around trust-based philanthropy, which sounds like this person on LinkedIn was kind of advocating for, is that there is this power dynamic inevitably between someone who has resources and someone who needs resources. That's going to be there, right? Let's just acknowledge that there's going to be a power dynamic there. And there's been traditionally a lot of funding that comes in that's just like, okay, open call or invite only, however it comes in, there's a grant opportunity and you can get this. And it becomes this kind of competition essentially. And a lot of upfront work is required by nonprofit organizations to even win the grant. If they get it, it's restricted. So they don't actually have the right resources or structures to do their best work. They're being kind of like pushed into a system, and it's elective, right? They don't have to apply for the grant, but these organizations need funding to do their work. So I can see, I guess I should just come out and say, like, I'm generally a proponent for trust-based philanthropy. I think it is a better way of doing this. I don't think that's necessarily at odds with your key take.
Yeah,
though.
me neither.
So maybe we could just like start there and get into some of the details.
Yeah, I mean, something that's coming up for me is like, where's the onus of responsibility for for changing these things? And I think for me in my position as a fundraiser, as an executive director, I feel like it's counterproductive to be villainizing my funders rather than spending the time to deeply understand what it is that they're trying to do and the impact that they're trying to have. Because if I deeply understand that, that's going to make me more competitive. And that puts me in a position where I'm actually seen as an ally and a partner rather than a hungry mouth to feed.
Okay, so I think that's a really important distinction, which is like we can do both. We can work with funders to be better funders, and we do that by being partners with them and not expecting them to just bend to our will. Because really, like at the end of the day, there's a shared objective here, or there should be if the partnership is healthy, where there is some kind of impact in the world that you as a practitioner or organization are working to make, and that an allied funder or an aligned funder feels like you are a good fit to help make, right? But I'm going to push back in a couple ways here. One, my understanding is you've basically given up on this style of fundraising.
Yeah, we don't go after these huge competitive grants anymore.
So tell me more about why you made that choice.
Well, because what I prefer to do is to go seek out individuals and organizations and build relationships first. So we don't go after these massive calls where I know that hundreds or thousands of other organizations are going to apply.
Yeah.
Because I have no relationship there. I don't necessarily understand that foundations, their needs or their goals or the way they think or the way they show up or who they're looking for. I don't know any of that stuff. All I have is a website with the requirements for the grant, right? And to me, that is this comes down to just like dollars and cents too. It's like, how much time and money am I going to put into this thing with what % chance that I'm going to get this grant, right? I would much rather put my time and effort into developing relationships that is going to give me a really, really high chance of getting the gift rather than spinning my wheels on these things, these organizations I know nothing about.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to keep going on this thread.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel like a broken system?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
So you think it's okay that these organizations who have gathered wealth in our society largely because founding organizations have built them as, just to be real, a tax haven for the most part. They've got all this wealth and power. They exist legally and in spirit to do good. And they are not spending down, in many cases, more than 5% a year. And they have the ability to. And the structure basically means that you have to have some kind of in to get money because you either already are successful enough or because you have a personal relationship with the program officer, or because you've been funded by someone that they know in their network. And as much as a lot of these orgs pay lip service to being really, research backed and objective about who they fundraise, that's not usually how it actually happens in the real world. So I don't think these things are necessarily exclusive, right? It's like, I do agree to your point around you shouldn't just expect to get money just because your mission matters, right? Like there is a healthy amount of competition. There's not, it's not a zero-sum game either. So I don't think this means that like every nonprofit who has a worthwhile mission is just deserving of all the foundation money in the world. And at the same time, like I do think some of these structures are inherently not as effective as they could or should be.
Okay, let's separate the fact that philanthropy has to exist in society from the way that we as leaders and fundraisers are going after that money.
Okay.
Because I agree with you. I mean, I like at a moral level, I'm like, how did we get to this place where this is the system that we have to operate in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Fine. Fair enough.
Yeah.
All sorts of questions arise with that, right? Like major shout out to Stepsky for their work.
Yeah.
On a personal level, I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like, I hope more foundations operate the way they do.
Yes.
Okay. Mackenzie Scott.
Yes.
Right? Great. Love that. Fantastic. But for us as individuals who are seeking the money to expect that from every foundation out there
right
now, I think is a waste of time, and frankly, just a not very smart way of going about fundraising.
Yeah, so I would agree that that's not a pragmatic strategy.
Yeah.
Right, is to hope that philanthropy is going to fix itself. And look, like, I mean, we had Rusty Stahl on the show recently who is like trying to advocate for some new fundraising mechanisms to fund the people. Like any systems level issue, there's a need for the kind of people who see that system and say like, fuck that.
Yeah.
And work to change the system. But that is long, hard, decades long work usually.
Sure is.
And then there's the pragmatic, like, well, we got to get the important, urgent work done within the broken system. And so what I'm hearing from your point of view is less like, oh, the philanthropic system is perfect, we should stop complaining, and more, this is the way it is. So either your work should be changing that, or your work should be figuring out how to operate within the constraints that exist. Is that generally your point?
That's exactly my point. That's
Okay.
exactly my point. There are people who are already funded by a foundation, right?
Yes.
And let's say you're going up for a renewal, or you're going up for, for an extension of that support. By all means, like, go have that conversation with your program officer about restructuring the flow of the money,
Yes.
right? Like, that is an opportunity where, yes, you can express to your funder that this isn't quite working for us, but there's already a partnership that exists. There's
Right.
already a relationship that exists. And that is meaningful feedback for that foundation to hear from their grantee about what's working or what's not.
I'd think about this sometimes from my point of view as an agency owner, and like a common but broken approach for hiring an agency is to put out an RFP, right? Hey, everybody, we have this project. We're looking for submissions to a proposal. It's very similar to applying for a grant. We basically don't do RFPs at Cosmic for a very pragmatic reason. And I believe that, and I've written about and spoken to people individually and publicly about, hey, and just like pretty much every agency owner who's ever been through an RFP process, hey, this actually isn't the greatest way to hire people like us. There's a better way to do this. And it is very similarly about partnership. I have similarly pragmatically decided we're not going to do that. Like, we are going to work with people who are certainly should be doing their research and talking to multiple agencies and seeing who's the right fit, but who are approaching it from a kind of peer level partnership from the beginning, and not a like, well, it has to be this many pages and, this set type, and you have to have these professional references, and no, we won't meet with you before you submit. Like, how are you supposed to do that and do good work, right? That's kind of similar to, I think, sometimes nonprofit leaders and fundraisers, maybe especially ones who are kind of early in their career, think, okay, well, I'm just going to just write a bunch of grants with people I have no real connection to or relationship to, and I'm going to kind of like mold our work to fit the requirements of the grant because that's just how we have to get money, right? That's not a good strategy. And I'm not saying, I mean, we work with organizations that are 90+% grant funded, but that's not how they do their grant work, right? There's a much deeper relationship and networking based approach to doing it. So it's both at some level, but I'd be really curious to hear more how you think about, okay, if you kind of flip the script and say, we're not entitled to this money, whether it's from a major institutional philanthropy or a major donor or a community member who's giving what to them is their best gift, but might not be a lot of money. Like, I'd like to hear your thoughts around like understanding the customer and thinking about it that way.
So everybody's got a motivation.
Yeah.
Individual motivation, organizational motivation, whatever makes them tick. And I don't think that we spend enough time in the sector deeply understanding what that is for our funders.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're generally better at that with individual donors.
Yep.
Right? Because it's a person.
Yep.
And you can ask them, like, why do you care about this?
Yeah.
Right? When you're asking a program officer, well, they're going to give you the company line, right? So there's it's a little less personal.
Yeah.
But when I think about like my time in tech, in for profit, business to business, and I was on this I ran a customer success team, and so much of our time we spent as a team asking our customers and trying to deeply understand what success looked like to them.
Yeah.
In their own job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, I'm working with Adam from HubSpot. And I'm like, Adam, what is going to make your boss think you're doing a great job, and what's going to get you a raise?
Yeah.
Right? Down to that level of like, what makes Adam work well? And then, of course, I want to understand what HubSpot's goals are too.
Yeah.
So we can demonstrate that our product is helping them achieve both individual level and company level success. I think the same thing needs to happen with foundations. Understand deeply what this individual that you're working with needs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a program officer, maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's somebody in between. understand deeply what they care about, and then also at that organizational level. And it's more than just like their like the 3 goals that they're stating on their website, right? It's like deeply understanding what they're tracking, what success looks like, what are they trying to improve at? Like that level, I think, is really important, so that when you put your proposal forward, you are addressing things that is speaking to a human and speaking to a team of people who are trying to get something done.
Hey friends, real quick before we continue today's episode. I'm Eric Ressler, founder and creative director at Cosmic. Cosmic is a creative agency purpose-built for nonprofits and mission-driven organizations. For the last 15 years, we've helped leaders like you nail your impact story and sharpen your strategy. But we're not here to just leave you with a fancy slide deck and a pat on the back. We roll up our sleeves and help you bring our ideas to life through campaigns, creative, and digital experiences. Our work together helps you earn trust, connect deeply with your supporters, and grow your fundraising and your impact. If you value the thinking we share here and want it applied to your biggest challenges, let's talk at designbycosmic.com. All right, back to today's conversation. I think about that when we're exploring client partnerships at Cosmic. And sometimes people have a really clear answer about that for the organization and personally. But I would say in more cases than not, that requires facilitation. It requires 2 skills that I've been really trying to lean into and acknowledge that I've developed over my career, which are deep listening and relentless curiosity. To me, like, to be a good designer, you have to be really good at both of those things. To be a good strategic person doing this work in a meaningful way, that's like, those skills are going to translate to almost any position in a good way, I think. On the flip side, I do think there is some reasonable criticism for some of these organizations that articulate they have a focus area or a mission, articulate they have standards and like details about who they will and will not fund and all those kind of things, but they're loosely held. I'm just going to go ahead and like put it out there. Chen Zuckerberg Initiative had some pretty strong opinions about who they were going to fund and what they stood for. And they were really quick to let go of those as soon as Trump was elected again. You know, I don't have any problem with like individual people at that organization who are like doing their best work in philanthropy and wanting to do good and came in earlier days where maybe that was a little bit more true. But these stated motivations and alignments are not always as clear or as real as they are stated. And so then funder priorities sort of just change on a whim at times. And hey, that's just the way the world works at some level, right? So again, back to the entitlements, like you got to be pragmatic about, you know, I've seen over and over again clients who have multi-year relationships with funders, sometimes 7 years long, and all of a sudden, oh, our priorities changed, you know, best of luck to you. And it's like, wait, that was a third of our operating budget. And you gave us 3 weeks notice.
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, that can happen with an individual donor too, right?
That's
That's not unique to a foundation, right? That happens. You need to build a business that can withstand those changes. That's
totally agree.
That's part of the job, I think.
100%.
Yeah, and someone like Chan Zuckerberg, like they should be held to account for their priorities changing. And
yeah,
I don't waste my time with that, right? Like,
yes.
And I'm looking for organizational partners who do have a clear sense of self, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
do know where they're headed, and those things could change, and I need to be ready for that.
Yeah.
But that's on me, right? To deeply understand the partner I'm looking for.
Yes. I mean, I agree. And I think like this is why I started by saying this is thorny, right? Because I think it is. Because I do agree that both can be true. As fundraisers, as leaders at organizations doing this work, we need to be doing the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
We need to be really understanding motivations and you know, trying to attract right fit partners for our work who are doing this work. There are funders out there institutional funders in philanthropies, even if the money came in less than ideal ways at the beginning, who have turned that money into incredible impact. So I don't want to come off as being like anti-philanthropy, anti-foundation, but the longer I've been doing this work, the more I do question a lot of these structures are kind of bullshit. And I've been seeing more and more of that, you know, interviewing some really awesome people even on our show and meeting them through the networks and also just kind of seeing some of the just frankly shitty downstream effects from some of these funders who, let's remember, have tax benefits to being set up this way, have hoarded massive amounts of wealth, who have invested that largely in things that are not necessarily good for the world and maybe even directly at odds with their stated mission. So they're in this position of privilege and power. And so we should hold them to a very high standard.
Yeah. Whose job is that?
Whose job in the world is that? I
Yeah.
mean, I think is society an acceptable answer? Like, I think it's
Designing Tomorrow, Eric and Jonathan? Like,
well, here's why I think I'm sticking up a little bit for your LinkedIn example here.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it kind of be all of our jobs? Like, if we care about this work, if we care about this sector being the best version of itself that it can be, which I know you do and I know we both do, we have to be holding all of this at the same time at some level. And look, like, you as executive director at the Seymour Center, that you've got mouths to feed, you've got impact to make here locally. How much of your time should you spend thinking about this? Probably very little. But there's a counterpoint to be made there too. That's like, these systems persist because no one says, hey, this kind of sucks. Let's do it a different way. So I think there's, I don't know, there's a lot to chew on here. And this is why I come back to, I think both can be true.
Yeah.
I think you can be pragmatic. I think you can continue to say, hey, you know what? Foundational institutional funding isn't a fit for us for these reasons. This system works for us. We're going to double down on that. And I know when you are talking to local community members and partners who are giving to you, you're doing the same thing, right? But yeah, whose job is it to fix philanthropy? That's a big one, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe as we're talking, like, my little act of resistance is just kind of bowing out of it, right? Of like, I'm not going to play this game.
Yeah.
I'm going to look for people who want to do good work together. And if it works out, we're going to do it. And if not, that's okay too. I guess maybe that's my little contribution, right? Is I'm just not applying.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's no one way of doing this work.
Yeah.
Like, that's something I've definitely learned.
For sure.
Like, even, and this comes down to what kind of org are you? Like, because you are a place-based organization, you have the ability to earn income. Not all issue areas have that ability, right? So it's like, some orgs really need that institutional funding because there isn't a market-based approach. It's really hard to raise from individual giving. It's the kind of work that's like important but not sexy. Someone's got to fund that stuff if we think it's real. So I think that my general take on this is that if we're going to have institutional philanthropy that is not government or that is government money, we should be consistently trying to do it better. Like, to me, that seems obvious. Does that mean we need to be entitled about, oh, my mission's important, so I deserve money? No, I don't think those two things are the same.
I think we just need to be really clear then when we are expressing our feelings about the system, so to speak, right? Especially if we are a practitioner in the social impact space, to be really clear about when you're talking about system change and when you're talking about like real grant seeking work. Because I can see if you're commenting on systems change, fantastic. Like, let it rip.
Yep.
If you're talking about actually going after money, the entitlement tone, I think, is hurting all of us. And
yes,
do better work to better understand your funders.
I think it can be, not always, but can be an excuse for an org that is not fundable.
Yeah.
There are, let's just be real, I'd say even a pretty big percentage of social impact organizations and nonprofits that aren't viable. Just like there's a number of businesses and startups that aren't viable. I mean, the world is brutal.
That's how it works.
And so I think that that challenge, that competition, if you want to use that word, there's a certain amount of it that's healthy. And I don't think that means we should just accept the way this has been done traditionally, because I think there are emerging ways that are not just like, don't just feel better and sound better, but actually just work better, right? When there are these orgs and these funders who have said, hey, you're right, like, this kind of sucks. How else might we do this work in a meaningful way? Not just because it's like progressive, but because it's actually like more effective at the end of the day in terms of creating the kind of impact we want to make. And how can we build social impact organizations that are not constrained by resources, but can, sit there and imagine and do bigger work and not always be stuck in scarcity or reactivity mode? Like, I mean, we're talking about the hardest problems in the world here. Like, we have to think big about it. So I don't know. I could keep going on like the nuance of this, and I don't have like good answers for all of it either. It's something I think about a lot, and every time I feel like I have a really solid take on it, there's some like counterpoint that I'm like, that's also true.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those where I really want to hear from listeners on the way you're thinking about this and the relationship with your funders, because I see the argument for both. This episode topic came out of a place of frustration.
Yeah.
For me, where I was like, come on.
Yeah.
So it's actually a little cathartic to talk this out with you, right? To be like, okay, yeah, actually, that particular post came from a real place, right? It wasn't just someone whining.
Right. And what I'll say is like, I think your perspective on this is relevant regardless, right? Like, because approaching it that way is naturally going to lead to finding better, more aligned, more sophisticated, more progressive funders who are going to give you better support and gifts and partnership.
Yeah, I think so.
So we don't need to choose, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just like, be clear about like, what is your place in this world and what feels right? Hey, if you want to speak up and do it, do it. And, if Jonathan thinks you're a little entitled, who gives a shit? Right? And I do think like, to be clear though, there is a way to do that that's constructive. And then there's a way to do it that's performative.
Yeah.
And so maybe the person you saw was a little bit more performative and felt a little bit more entitled in a way that was just like, oh, I need attention, or maybe they're just venting. Who knows, right?
Who knows?
A thorny one. One of our thorniest ones yet.
Yeah, in fact, I think this might be the biggest disagreement we've had on the show yet, so that's good.
All right,
good.
Let's keep them
All
coming.
right, well, this is a good one, Eric. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe, or even leave us a comment. It really helps. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do for your cause and for being part of the movement to move humanity and the planet forward.